On this episode of The Best of Our Knowledge, young learners at a New York charter school recently attended a pep rally for historically black colleges and universities. A new tool aims to predict the routes of migratory birds. And several New York public colleges are changing their official designation to university. We'll speak with one university president about the change. These stories and more next on The Best of Our Knowledge. Welcome to The Best of Our Knowledge. I'm your host, Lucas Willard. Some schools think it's never too early to start thinking about college. As part of its programming recognizing Black History Month, a charter school in Albany, New York, recently hosted HBCU Day. In February, KIPP Tech Valley Primary School held the school-wide pep rally to celebrate historically black colleges and universities with their youngest students. Wearing the colors of HBCUs, students from kindergarten through fourth grade gathered to show their school pride. The Best of Our Knowledge's Jody Cowan reports.
It is HBCU Day. What day is it? HBCU Day!
At KIPP Tech Valley Primary School, where 98% of attendees are students of color, many of the charter school's faculty and alumni attended or are attending historically black colleges and universities. To celebrate HBCU Day, third grader Imani Williams wore red, black, and white to represent Clark Atlanta University and their team, the Panthers. For Williams, preparing for the assembly was an exciting way to start the week.
I've been practicing for one day. We practiced yesterday, and now we know our chant, and it's really good.
Though she's only in third grade, Williams is already looking ahead to her college career and has Clark Atlanta University at the top of her list.
I love HBCU and KIPP because we get to talk about our universities and our colors and the chants from our university, so I really like it here. I want to go to my college, Clark Atlanta University, and I feel like it's going to be a great class because it already is in KIPP.
Gathering neatly by grade, KIPP's gymnasium filled with teachers and students eager to showcase their HBCU spirit by sharing reworked chants and traditional college fight songs.
I am rich with knowledge. I am rich with strength. I am rich with ideas. I can reach my goal. I will achieve my goal. I am smart. I came in great. And I will leave greater. I am a Howard kid. Yeah, that's me.
In addition to showing school pride and having a lot of fun, the main goal of HBCU Day is to promote a positive self-image. Michael Jean-Baptiste is Director of Operations at KIPP.
It's all rooted in just making sure that our students are able to just feel really proud in their black skin, that when they walk through the halls of our school that they know that it is a culturally relevant space where they can feel welcome, as they go through this week, but also as they go throughout our school on a daily basis.
The ties between KIPP and HBCUs are so strong, even the class homerooms are named after colleges. In the past, the classrooms were named based on each individual teacher's alma mater. Baptiste says the idea to focus on HBCUs came from the school's principal, Fiona Wilcox.
She had the vision. I was like, I love it. It sounds great. And I think it's a great way to for our students, just get that positive reinforcement on a daily basis. Most of the community that we serve and the demographic that we serve are black and brown children. So we have an opportunity where we could be very intentional as a school leaders, where we could just really make it happen. So we made sure that we, changed just all the logos in the classrooms, making sure that we find different opportunities throughout the school year for students to be able to do cheer-offs. That pride of their homerooms is infused within them.
Principal Wilcox says that pride allows students to see themselves in history and encourages them to focus on their future education goals.
We want to make sure that our students know about different colleges and universities, of course, but we really want to make sure they're getting exposed to historically black colleges and universities, schools that were created for their ancestors, where they can go to be celebrated, where they learn authentic black history, where their traditions are not just talked about, but celebrated, where they can really show up to be their authentic selves, which we're trying to cultivate here as well.
As part of the curriculum at KIPP, the students are introduced to college-level concepts at a young age. Wilcox says it's to help prepare students for greater success down the line.
what we do here in the K-4 level, like our easy math that kids feel is easy in kindergarten, that's setting you up for your algebra class in high school. That's going to set you up for your entry-level math course in college. And so adding all of that together has really been great, and we're seeing the connection and students making the connection from what they're doing here to going to college and already having these aspirations of where they want to go, even though it's going to take them a lot of years to get there.
That places in HBCUs. HBCU.
For the best of our knowledge, I'm Jody Cowan.
You're listening to The Best of Our Knowledge. I'm Lucas Willard. Since the COVID-19 pandemic, birdwatching has enjoyed an explosion in popularity. Now, a new study could help determine what time of year your favorite migratory bird might show up in your backyard. In the smartphone era, birders have used an app by the Cornell Lab of Ornithology called eBird to record the birds they've seen and to inform other users about where species are being spotted. Now, scientists have announced a new model under development called BirdFlow. Scientists say the predictive model, with the help of eBird data, can accurately forecast where a migratory bird will go next, typically not a very easy task for biologists. BirdFlow, a project from researchers at Cornell and at UMass Amherst, was recently reported in the journal Methods in Ecology and Evolution. To learn more, I spoke with UMass researcher and BirdFlow project team member Daniel Sheldon.
eBird is a project run by the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, and it's designed for birders who, go out birdwatching, and they can submit their observations online through the app or the website. It's been growing over probably 15, maybe even 20 years. And what's really powerful about it is you can collect information, really almost in real time about where different types of birds are being seen, sort of where and when. And, if you rewind to the days before this, if you looked in a field guide, you could see maps showing where a particular species range was. And you would typically see two snapshots. You would see in the winter, where is their wintering range? You would see in the summer, where is their breeding range? But you really didn't have much information, much quantitative information, especially about where the birds were in between. And so as eBird started collecting observations from citizen scientists and birders all over the world, we really started filling in a lot of those gaps, to the point where now there are millions of people who use eBird. And through the modeling done at the Lab of Ornithology using eBird data, particularly a project called the Status and Trends Project, they produced these really beautiful weekly maps that show the abundance of different species of birds, at very fine detail. So, you can animate these and sort of see them as a movie changing through the year. And they're both really beautiful, and they fill in a lot of quantitative knowledge about where birds are that we just didn't have beforehand.
So is it possible then, through this data, we can predict when a certain species of bird might show up in your backyard?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you look at these animations, they'll show you the typical yearly pattern of each species of bird. So for example, one of the species that we looked at in our study was the American woodcock. And you could see that, for example, maybe in late March or early April, this bird might show up in your area just by looking at these animations.
Could you tell me about then how, in the BirdFlow study, how the data from eBird was incorporated into learning more about predicting the movements of migratory birds? Were there certain scenarios that were crunched? what went into determining the data in the maps that are found in the study?
Yeah, that's a great question. So eBird is wonderful, and these weekly maps from status and trends are also wonderful. But what they show you are the distribution, or the abundance of the species as a whole. It doesn't tell you how the birds actually moved, what routes they followed, to explain these sort of changing maps, abundance maps. And actually, if you watch them, just visually, you can sort of see these animations, and you can mentally, with your eye, you can sort of infer what the movement paths are likely to be. For example, if you see, a species of birds that winters in Central America, and you see in the maps, you see the distribution slowly shifting north to cover the eastern US, you can sort of infer that the birds are sort of en masse moving from south to north. But there's actually they're not tracking any individual birds. We're not seeing any individual routes. So the main idea of bird flow is to actually infer the movement routes that the birds are taking in order to best explain this sort of changing pattern of abundance that you can see from eBird.
Are birds an indicator of weather, of climate? How can this be used to, when comparing 1 year's data versus maybe data from 5 or 6 years ago?
Yeah, this is a really excellent question. There are many things that are changing in birds' environments. This includes both climate and habitat. And one of the things that we would love to be able to do is to investigate how things like migration patterns are changing over many years, to investigate the effects of climate change, let's say, on birds and bird migration.
So while the eBird data is really useful, I'm sure there are some limitations to it too. So as where things are right now, what can't we predict? What are some of the limits?
Yeah, great question. One of the things that we would love to be able to do is actually look at how migration routes actually change over time. And while eBird data goes back for at least probably 15 or more years, currently the abundance predictions that we get are not year specific. So when we are modeling the bird migration routes and we are making predictions, we're at the moment modeling sort of a typical year. What is the typical yearly pattern of a particular species? So that's a current limitation of the model, but something that we would hope, as we get more and more data, we would start to be able to make it year specific and look at trends and changes over time.
Daniel Sheldon is a researcher at UMass Amherst and is a project team member of the Bird Flow Project, a collaboration between UMass and the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. You're listening to the best of our knowledge. Last month, the Best of Our Knowledge reported on a December change in a New York State definition that prompted several colleges to rebrand as universities. One such higher ed facility going through with the change is SUNY Plattsburgh, which was officially recognized as a university in February for all state and federal purposes. To learn more about the change, the Best of Our Knowledge's pep-rally spoke with SUNY Plattsburgh President Alexander Agnetti.
So from a recruitment standpoint, international students view university status very differently than college status. So for us, a university student population that comes from overseas or from an international destination views the university as being something very different and in some cases more prestigious. So for us, a recruitment piece, it helps to establish that we have a bona fide university offering for international students. So it's going to help us with our international student recruitment.
And for the students that are on campus, what does it mean for them?
I think it just indicates that they know that they're in a high quality, basically a high-performing academic environment. And it verifies that not only are we a university, we knew that all along, but it's nice to be able to say that out loud. So,
Yeah, I mean, you are and have been the State University of New York at Plattsburgh. Were people kind of scratching their head at the renewed or new designation?
So the change in name went from State University College at Plattsburgh to State University at Plattsburgh. So it's a subtle change, but it's very significant, and I think that the opportunity as a university, it helps us, I believe, in the marketing and I think recruitment of students for the area as well. So.
You mentioned it's very good for recruitment for international students. Do New York State, where many of the students come from, and other within the U.S. students pay attention as much?
So in the state of New York, SUNY has great brand recognition. It is the premier public institution here for the state. What we do know is that when SUNY offered a period of almost 2 weeks of free applications, we saw more than 140% increase in the number of applications to SUNY Plattsburgh, which is exciting. And that was before we had the change in designation. So we've already got great brand recognition and a great understanding of the programming that we offer. What's nice about the designation for the university is that other colleges, smaller colleges in the state of New York that are privates, they're switching to a university designation. So the concern is always going to be, in some ways, confusion. Are we not a university because these folks are universities? So I think it's a matter of, in many ways, providing a bit of a level playing field when it comes to the recruitment of students. But from my standpoint, SUNY remains the best option and best affordable way for a student to get a great education and a wonderful degree and a start on their career in the state of New York. So we're really proud to be a university. We think in many ways it really does add a little bit of, I'm trying to think, not necessarily a showcase, but certainly a little oomph to the fact that, hey, we do great things here, we're a wonderful contributor to the community, and the community can count on us for being a solid partner for the future. So,
what about the faculty? What does it mean for the faculty?
That's a good question. I think that in some cases there's an idea that perhaps we will get additional funding or we might be able to attract more grants. That remains to be seen. So we'll see if that has an impact for them as well. But certainly it does elevate in many ways the great message that SUNY Plattsburgh has to the world that, hey, we're a world-class university and we're proud of what we do.
So are you expecting more competition as more and more of the SUNY campuses are designated university?
So I believe 11 of the comprehensive colleges are pursuing this change. And we may be number 5 or 6 in the order, but I would expect relatively soon. I don't think that the comprehensives compete with one another. I think we act as a collective that serves a really important group of students that are looking for a education in an institution that feels very welcoming, that will embrace their educational needs and desires, provides a high level of support, and again gives them that career readiness to be able to step off stage with degree in hand. So I think our comprehensive sector provides a really important niche for students here in the state of New York.
That's SUNY Plattsburgh President Alexander Agnetti speaking with the best of our knowledge's pep-rally. Mohawk people have been making beaded jewelry for thousands of years. It's a practice deeply ingrained in a lot of Native cultures. Today, on the best of our knowledge, we're going to meet a young Mohawk beader who's based in the Adirondacks. Jocelyn Jock beads intricate earrings and other artwork, but it wasn't until she left home that she found a passion for this part of her culture. North Country Public Radio's Emily Russell brings us her story.
Jocelyn Jock was driving through the Adirondacks recently when she spotted a dead porcupine on the side of the road. So she pulled over and started plucking out its quills.
At first, I was just pulling handfuls out of it and just thanking the creator and everything.
Jock makes jewelry with those quills. They're hollow, so they act like a kind of bead.
I went to get in my car to drive away, and I was I can't just leave it there. So I just threw it in the back, and then I drove home.
At her home in Bloomingdale, Jock keeps those quills in a little clear box. They're about 2 inches long, a kind of pale white color, and are super sharp. Jock says it took her 5 whole days to harvest these.
Each porcupine has about 30,000 quills on it, and you have to pluck them individually by hand. You have to wash them individually, you have to boil them, you have to dry them, and then you have to trim them.
Jock first learned to bead when she was just 6 years old, but it didn't turn into a big part of her childhood. She lived in Akwesasne, but went to school off the reservation in Messina. During the day, she'd be surrounded by white people and white culture. Jock says bouncing between worlds was really hard.
I wasn't white enough to fit in with the white kids, and I wasn't native enough to fit in with the native kids. So it was kind of just like a really back and forth of having to like walk a very particular line.
Eventually, she left Akwesasne, moved to the Adirondacks for college. But then she started going back home to see family. That is when she really began beading on a regular basis.
I would visit with my mom, and that's what we would do. She would teach me, and we'd kind of just talk, and we would bead, and that would be like our hanging out when I would go home. And then COVID happened, so I stopped going home so often, and I started doing it here.
She watched videos on YouTube, found patterns on Pinterest. Jock has been beading now for years.
I am just going to bring the beads down to the end of the string.
She's beading now onto a piece of felt. Jock tightens the 2 tiny beads up.
And then I will pierce the fabric with the needle. Pull it all the way through. And then I will go back through the 2 beads. And that is 1 stitch.
1 stitch takes her about 30 seconds. So beaded earrings can take anywhere from 4 to 40 hours to make. She beads either on her lunch break or when she's not working at Nori's, a natural food store in Saranac Lake. Right now, she sells her earrings on commission.
Almost all of my coworkers on the cafe side have them. Almost everyone at Nori's has a pair of my earrings.
That voice you hear in the background is Jock's older sister, Presley Ransom.
Sego ganatahawi yungyats. My name is Presley. I am 30 years old from Akwesasne.
Ransom and Jock live together, along with their other sister, Keely, and Ransom's husband. Like Jock, Ransom bounced between native and white cultures as a kid, never feeling like she fit in anywhere. Ransom says that really left a mark on her.
I really suppressed my culture. I never learned how to bead. I never learned how to dance, and I never learned how to cook our traditional foods. So to watch her really embrace our culture has been phenomenal, to be able to back her nonstop and to be pushing her art. It's amazing to see.
Ransom has been a kind of guinea pig for Jock's earrings. She also helped Jock connect with a ski company out west, Vishnu Free Ski. The company commissioned a beaded piece by Jock that took her 600 hours to make. A photo of that piece is now the design on a pair of pretty fancy downhill skis. Jock says the piece tells a story of family, of Mohawk culture, and of a time when Native children were forcibly taken from their homes and stripped of that culture.
The orange colors are for the residential schools and for all those who didn't make it home. The strawberries that are there's 3 of them. It's kind of just representing me and my sisters. And strawberries are really good medicine.
Then there are rows of pink and red for the missing and murdered Indigenous women. Jock says it's important for her not only to embrace her culture, but to share it with others, both the beauty and the pain. She also hopes that sharing and selling her work on Instagram inspires others to do the same.
I hope that other younger Native artists see it and they go, oh, I can do that too. And they just try their hand at anything. And they just post about it and they just try to find their voice.
Jock found her voice through her beaded jewelry and through embracing her Mohawk culture. She hopes one day she can bead full-time, make a real living doing what she really loves. In the Adirondacks, I'm Emily Russell.
You're listening to The Best of Our Knowledge. A recent study found fewer school-age children died by suicide in 2020, and researchers say that might be linked to pandemic-era virtual learning. WSKG's Megan Zerez reports.
Researcher Ben Hansen of the University of Oregon says the number of suicide deaths among K-12 students tends to fluctuate based on when they're in school. For instance, there are fewer suicide deaths during summer break or winter vacation. Hansen says his research suggests that schools going virtual in March of 2020 had a similar effect. Despite all the disruption, fewer kids died by suicide.
When we get to finally August and September of 2020, we find the places that reopen, indeed you start to see youth suicide rising again.
And now initial CDC data from the last 2 years shows that in much of the country, the number of youth suicides has gone back up and surpassed pre-pandemic levels, which were already at a historic high. But in New York, while suicide deaths did go up after lockdowns were lifted, they're still lower than they were pre-pandemic. It's not yet clear why New York is doing better than other states, but just because the number of deaths is down, it doesn't mean things are perfect. Death data doesn't count the number of kids who experience suicidal ideations or who attempt suicide and survive. And it doesn't count the number of kids who are living with other serious mental health concerns. Lisa Herschel heads Family and Children's of Cortland. The group helps fund school-based mental health clinics across the southern tier. Here she is speaking at a recent town hall.
We've seen a 350 to 400% increase in the severity of need in the school buildings when it comes to mental health. That's a huge increase over the past 3 years.
And Herschel says kids may be experiencing suicidal ideation at younger ages.
For example, we had a 5-year-old who actually with intent attempted suicide, a 5-year-old.
Ben Hansen, the researcher we heard earlier, says he doesn't want people to get the wrong impression from his research. He says for the vast majority of kids, attending school in person is better for both their academic success and their mental health. But
there are some kids who probably were already isolated at school to begin with, for which, the COVID isolation actually might have been protective for them.
And now that COVID isolation is largely gone, Hansen says it's important to recognize when students are experiencing stress, isolation, or bullying, and to intervene before it's too late.
WSKG's Megan Zerez reporting. This has been The Best of Our Knowledge, episode 1693. The Best of Our Knowledge is a national production of WAMC Northeast Public Radio. Thanks to associate producer Jody Cowan. Our executive producer is Dr. Alan Chartok. To hear past episodes, visit our flagship station's website at wamc.org. Until next time, I'm Lucas Willard.